I didn't know her name when I pulled her from the wreckage. At the time, she was just another body drifting through the debris field, a silhouette caught between the broken ribs of a shattered starship, her form tumbling slowly as emergency lights flickered and died. The ship had exploded without warning, torn apart by a pirate ambush near the outer trade lanes. My freighter, the Wayfarer's Knot, had only survived because it was ugly, slow, and not worth stealing. I was a cargo hauler, nothing more. I moved food, machine parts, sometimes animals, sometimes people who couldn't afford passenger liners. I wasn't a soldier, wasn't a hero, and I definitely wasn't the kind of man who changed the fate of galaxies. I thought I was saving one life. The scanner showed faint biosigns inside a pressure-sealed chamber that had somehow remained intact. Against my better judgment, I suited up and went out in a rescue pod. Space was quiet in that way that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat, like the universe was waiting to see if you'd mess up. When I cut through the twisted alloy and pried open the hatch, I found her. She was tall, even curled into herself, with skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. Thin cracks of dried blood traced her temple. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She wore clothing that looked ceremonial rather than practical, layered fabrics woven with metallic threads, symbols stitched into the seams that glowed dimly in the darkness. Not military, not civilian, something else. I remember thinking, who wears silk to a gunfight in space? I didn't hesitate. I pulled her free, secured her in the pod, and brought her aboard my ship. Only after the airlock sealed and gravity returned did I notice the small circlet still clinging to her hair, bent but unbroken. It pulsed softly, responding to her heartbeat. I should have asked questions. Instead, I treated her wounds. For 3 days, she drifted in and out of consciousness. My ship's medical bay wasn't designed for aliens. Half the time it couldn't even tell me what her organs were doing, but whatever she was stubbornly alive. I slept on the floor beside her, waking whenever the monitors spiked or dipped, adjusting fluids, cooling her fever with recycled water and damp cloths. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes. They were not human eyes. The sclera shimmered silver instead of white, and the pupils expanded into starburst patterns that shifted as she focused on me. She didn't scream. She didn't recoil. She studied me. "You stayed," she said, her voice weak but clear, translated smoothly by my ship's universal matrix. "Why?" I shrugged, suddenly very aware of how small and unimportant I was compared to the moment unfolding. "Didn't feel right leaving you out there." Her gaze lingered, sharp despite her condition. "You did not know who I was." "Nope. If you had known," she continued, "you might have chosen differently." "Still wouldn't have left you," I said. "Space is cruel enough already." Something shifted in her expression then, surprise, maybe, or something like sadness. She closed her eyes again, exhausted. "Then the galaxy has already changed," she whispered. I thought it was delirium. Her name was Lyren. She told me that on the 7th day, when she could finally sit up without assistance. She moved with a natural grace that made my cramped medical bay feel even smaller. As she recovered, more details emerged, the faintly luminescent markings along her arms that rearranged themselves with her emotions, the way my ship's systems sometimes responded to her presence, as if recognizing an authority I couldn't see. She never asked me where we were going. She never demanded anything. She listened. I told her about my life because it felt easier than asking about hers. About growing up on a dust-heavy mining moon where the air tasted like rust. About losing my parents to a hull breach that the company classified as unavoidable structural failure. About deciding that hauling cargo was safer than trusting corporations or governments with your life. She listened like every word mattered. When I finally asked her what had happened to her ship, she was quiet for a long time. It was an Imperial vessel, she said carefully, ambushed by those who feared what it carried. What did it carry? I asked. She met my eyes. Me. That should have scared me. Instead, I laughed, assuming it was a joke or some cultural metaphor I didn't understand. You're saying pirates attacked a whole ship just for you? Yes. The laughter died in my throat. She explained then, not all at once, but in fragments, as if revealing the truth too quickly might shatter it. Her people were not numerous, but they ruled a vast interstellar dominion through diplomacy, tradition, and something more ancient, a living symbiosis between ruler and realm. Their Empress was not merely a leader. She was a conduit, bound biologically and psychologically to the systems under her care. Lyren had been the designated successor. The ambush had been orchestrated by rival houses who feared the changes she represented. The Imperial fleet believed her dead. You could have left me, she said softly. History would have continued along its expected path. Sounds like a bad path, I replied. Her lips curved in a small smile. Yes, it was. We didn't stay together long. That was the plan anyway. When Lyren was strong enough to walk the length of the ship without assistance, she asked me to alter course toward a neutral relay world where she could make contact with loyalists. I agreed. I didn't ask for payment. Saving a life didn't come with an invoice. At least, that's what I told myself. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. I didn't want her to go. Space is lonely, especially when you've trained yourself not to care about anyone long enough for them to leave. Lyren filled the ship with quiet presence, with questions that cut deeper than casual conversation. She challenged my cynicism, without ever mocking it. On the day we reached the relay world, she stood at the airlock with a small pack slung over her shoulder. I will not forget you, she said. Try not to, I replied. I'd hate to think I was just a pit stop. Her expression softened. You were not. You were a choice. Before I could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently against mine, a gesture that sent a faint warmth through my skull, like static before a storm. For what it is worth, she added, you have already altered the balance of power in ways you cannot yet imagine. Then she was gone. I watched the airlock seal and told myself that was the end of it. I was wrong. The galaxy began to change within months. Trade routes shifted. Pirate activity declined in regions long considered lawless. Old feuds cooled without explanation. News feeds spoke in careful tones about a restructuring within one of the oldest interstellar empires, rumors of a new ruler emerging from supposed death. They called her the Veiled Empress. They said she had survived assassination, returned without warning, and dismantled entire power blocks with nothing but decrees and presence. Entire fleets stood down when her flagship arrived. Systems pledged allegiance without firing a shot. They said she ruled differently, mercifully, strategically, personally. I listened from the cockpit of my freighter, watching history unfold on cracked monitors while hauling grain and spare parts. I never once heard her name spoken aloud, until the day an Imperial envoy docked with my ship. They were polite, impeccably dressed, armed in ways my scanners couldn't identify. They requested my presence on a secure channel and addressed me with a title I didn't recognize. Honored Preserver, they called me. I think you've got the wrong guy, I said. They smiled in unison. We do not. I was escorted, gently but firmly, aboard an Imperial vessel that dwarfed my freighter in every possible way. Its halls were alive with subtle energy, responsive to thought and movement. At the heart of it all, seated upon a living throne that seemed grown rather than built, was Lyren. She looked different, stronger, taller. The faint glow in her skin burned brighter, steadier. The circlet I'd seen bent and broken was now restored, fused seamlessly into her crown. When she smiled, the room itself seemed to lean closer. "You came," she said. "Didn't feel like I had much choice," I replied, glancing at the guards. She waved them away. "You always have a choice." We talked for hours. She told me how my rescue had become a symbol, a story whispered through loyal networks, proof that survival had been guided by something other than destiny or bloodline. She told me how, in hiding, she'd learned what her empire truly needed by seeing it from the outside. And she told me why she'd summoned me. "I cannot rule as my predecessors did," she said. "Not if this empire is to endure. I need anchors, witnesses, people who remind me what it means to be small and still matter." I laughed bitterly. "You want me to be a reminder?" "I want you to stand beside me," she said simply. "Not as a subject, not as a symbol, as yourself." I thought of my ship, my quiet routes, my carefully constructed insignificance. I thought of the girl I'd pulled from the wreckage, bleeding and alone, who had trusted me without knowing my name. "I'm not cut out for palaces," I said. Her smile was gentle. Neither was I. Years passed. Under Lyren's rule, the empire transformed, not into a utopia, but into something more honest. Power was redistributed. Borders softened. Systems, once crushed under taxation, began to thrive. She listened more than she commanded, and when she commanded, it was with clarity rather than fear. I stayed. Not as a general or a noble, but as an advisor who spoke when things felt wrong. A human voice in a chorus of ancient expectations. Sometimes I argued with her. Sometimes I lost. Sometimes she reminded me that saving one life didn't obligate me to save the galaxy. It only gave the galaxy a chance. On quiet nights, we would stand on the observation deck, watching stars drift by in slow arcs. "You changed everything," she said once. I shook my head. "I just open a hatch." She looked at me, eyes reflecting 1,000 systems at peace. "Sometimes," she replied, "that is enough." I had thought I'd saved one life. Instead, the galaxy gained an Empress. And somehow, against all odds, I gained a place in a universe I'd never believed had room for me. On quiet nights, we would stand on the observation deck, watching stars drift by in slow arcs. "You changed everything," she said once, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I shook my head. "I just open a hatch." She looked at me, eyes reflecting 1,000 systems at peace. "Sometimes," she replied, "that is enough." But as the years went on, I realized it was never just about the hatch. Every decision, every small act of mercy or defiance, rippled outward. Systems healed, people flourished, and old tyrannies crumbled without war because she ruled with both courage and compassion. And I was there, not as her shadow, not as a courtier, not as a mere human observer, but as someone she trusted implicitly, someone who had once simply chosen to save a life. Then came the day that tested us both. A coalition of rival houses, remnants of the forces that had tried to kill her decades before, had begun an insidious campaign in the fringe systems. They sabotaged trade, spread propaganda, and threatened rebellion. It was subtle, almost invisible, but deadly. And for the first time, Lyren's patience was tested. She called me to her council chamber, the heart of her living throne, which pulsed faintly in response to her presence. "I cannot do this alone," she admitted, a rare crack in her otherwise unshakable composure. "I need someone who remembers what it's like to be outside the Empire, to see the world as it truly is." I nodded, understanding immediately. We had navigated treachery together before, but this time it was larger, more dangerous. And the stakes were no longer just survival, they were the future of billions. Together, we traveled to the contested systems, disguised as traitors and diplomats. I saw firsthand the fear that had once gripped these people, the distrust sown by those who sought to maintain the old order. And then they met Lyren, not as an abstract ruler or distant empress, but as a living, breathing symbol of change. Her presence alone was enough. She didn't need armies. She didn't need weapons. The moment she spoke to councils, mediators, and local governors, their hostility softened. Centuries of distrust melted in her careful, deliberate diplomacy. And when the opposition finally realized they had no leverage left, they capitulated, not with force, but with the understanding that a new order had arrived. We returned to the capital in silence, tired but victorious. She turned to me as we stood on the observation deck, watching the twin suns set over the gleaming cityscape. "You see," she said, "one life saved a one person who chose to act without knowing the consequences. It changed everything." I swallowed, thinking of the young woman I had pulled from the wreckage, terrified and bleeding, and the galaxy she had grown to rule. "I never thought I'd matter," I said. She reached for my hand. "You mattered from the moment you opened that hatch. You gave me a future, a choice. And that choice became the lifeblood of the Empire." We stood together in silence, letting the enormity of what had happened sink in. For the first time, I understood that saving a life wasn't just about one person. It was about the ripple effects that could alter entire civilizations, entire galaxies. In the years that followed, the Empire thrived. Lyren's name became a beacon of hope, whispered in the darkest corners of the fringe systems and celebrated in the capital's grand halls. And I, ordinary, unremarkable me, continued my quiet work beside her. I advised, I guided, I reminded her of what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with stars. Every so often, she would smile and ask, "Do you ever regret staying?" And I would shake my head. Never. I thought I was saving one life. Turns out, I helped the galaxy gain an empress. Lyren would laugh, that soft, luminous laugh that could make entire fleets stand down without a word. And together, we would watch the stars, knowing that in a universe built on chaos and chance, one act of courage could echo across the cosmos and change everything. Because sometimes, all it takes to shift the course of history is opening a hatch, choosing to act, and believing that even one life can matter. And in that truth, I had found my place, not as a ruler, not as a hero, but as a witness to the rise of an empress, the guardian of her vision, and a friend who had been given the impossible privilege of saving the galaxy by saving her.